Listen to me. He has been going on and on about Mars. He has really been there.
Use your head, you dumb bitch. He's just acting out the secret agent portion of his ego trip.
I'm afraid that's not possible.
Why not?
Because we haven't implanted it yet.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris, and I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host and voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
And we are very thrilled to welcome our guest today because, in a sense, if this person didn't exist, there's a possibility the Cine-Files might not exist because
Wow.
WTF with Marc Maron, which was launched in 2009, is one of the most important podcasts of all time. It spawned a whole bunch of podcasts, and while we didn't directly try to copy WTF, it's certainly something that I have been listening almost since it came out and wouldn't exist without its producer, Brendon McDonald, who has produced all of his shows right up to the one I listened to yesterday, which was number 1,539. Brendon McDonald, welcome to the Cine-Files.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be here. And well, yeah, that sounds like too much. I shouldn't have done all of that.
Yeah, I think you made a mistake somewhere along the way.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to add, and just to kind of go along with what Steve said, having been in this business a little bit longer and stumbling into it kind of ass backwards, WTF and the Bill Simmons podcasts were the two most influential ones that got me into podcasting and got me into hosting shows. And then, of course, like a year or two after I got into it, the Cine-Files started with Steve and I. So one of the things we did bond over was our shared appreciation for WTF. So in no small part, and I don't think it's overblown in any way, shape, or form, was I influenced by the WTF podcast by Mark, and of course the Bill Simmons podcast, to actually do the things I'm doing. So I don't think it's overstating that if I hadn't started, Steve and I wouldn't have done the Cine-Files eventually. So the fact that this is all leading back to WTF is not overstating it in any way, shape, or form. But thank you very much for creating one of the best podcasts that have ever been out there. And I think a big reason why podcasts are so big nowadays. So
well, I appreciate that for sure. I think we all three of us can take a second to thank Bill Simmons, because he definitely, his show was the reason why I started doing it. There were basically two shows, Bill Simmons' show and Tom Sharpling, who's become a friend of mine, his show out of New Jersey called The Best Show. Those were the shows I was listening to like on my iPod at the time, like 2007. I was, working in radio jobs thinking like, this is great. This is a lot more freedom than I'm allowed and I'm afforded in the very strict programmatic confines of commercial radio. And so I was just chomping at the bit to do a podcast. And when Mark asked me in 2009 if I was interested or if I'd have any, he was basically like, do you know what a podcast is? Do you have any knowledge of that? I was like, not only do I know what it is, we're going to do one right now. Like that was how fast the reaction was. And it was totally because I got into the habit of having Bill's show in my ear and having, shows that I had been listening to on the radio, but never really caught them with regularity because of time. And, now this was a great medium for us. And that was really how we came to it in 2009. We were just like, yeah, we're going to do this. This is the way we want to be expressing ourselves through audio, which both Mark and I had been working together in for about 5 years then. And was the freedom that it afforded was great. So that was how we got up and running.
I'm curious, did you see something, because Mark is such a good interviewer, did you see something in him in those Air America days that made you like, oh no, I think there's something special here that hasn't quite found its place yet?
Oh, absolutely. But I wouldn't say I thought it specifically around interviewing. I think my reaction when I was, months into working with him at Air America, which we started in 2004, it was just 20 years ago. This past April 1st was the first day we were on the air at Air America. And I knew before we even launched, when we were doing test shows, I remember saying to other producers, this is the guy. Like he wasn't being featured on the show. He was like the sidekick. Right. And I was like, we need to focus on him. Like he could be like Stern. This guy can connect with people. And so the talent that I noticed with Marc, which was rooted in his comedy and how he expressed himself on stage, was his ability to take, very, intense, sometimes dark, sometimes psychologically complicated premises and work them into like everyday life and filtering them through your life and like, how do you get through your day? And when we would have phone calls coming into the radio show, we would have, this was ostensibly a political talk radio station. Air America Radio was supposed to be like the left-wing answer to right-wing radio. And, so there was politics. It was a mandate of like, this is supposed to be a political show. Right. And we found that the most reaction that we got, most phone calls, most feedback from listeners was when Marc just talked about his life, when he talked about his cats, when he talked about the food he was making. Anything that engaged people on their level was the stuff that made them connect with Marc. And I just always was like, he's the guy, we can do this. And podcasting was a perfect way to do it. And it just so happened that the way we were kind of facilitating getting his personality out there was by having him talk to other people. It's just like, you couldn't just have an hour of monologue twice a week. So let's have other people in. We had other comedians doing characters at the early stages of doing the show. Yeah. So it was really just figuring it out as like a variety show. How do we make this work? But my mindset always was, this is going through him. This is filtered through Marc. This is all his personality. And I still, to this day, over 1,500 episodes in, the way I think of the show is that it's one man's audio journal through life. And it just so happens that famous people stop by. But like, I really have to keep that mentality that everything gets filtered through Marc. Otherwise, we lose our reason.
That's such an excellent point. It's something that people come all the time and reach out and ask me like, over the years, like, how do I get into it? How do I get into it? And I always tell them, get a good microphone, get a good setup, but it's personality that sells. That's the overarching thing. Do you have that personality? Because when you go on those diatribes, when you go on those tangents, people will go with you because of the personality. Steve and I just finished doing a short here for the Cine-Files where one of our big fans went all the way back to one of our original episodes and found our first digression away from a movie to talk about our lives or talk about our political opinions on something. And we talked about how that has been such an essential part of why people have liked our show over the years. So to hear you say that that's a big thing you saw within Marc, that the digressions were just as interesting as the main stuff he was talking about as being the thing that put him over. It's the thing that you see and you feel and you sense. And when you see it, you can't quantify it, but it's different and it's special and it's unique. And so it speaks volumes that you notice that and were able to make it all come together when you guys branched out on your own.
I'll tell you just what my experience was of finding the show, because so 2010, 2011 was like probably the roughest year or so of my life. Had a lot of, my dad died and the film I had made kind of tanked and I was really down. And I found WTF and the way that Marc would have conversations with people, I'd never heard. Because when people go around, as better than anybody, when people go around they're going around to plug something and they have their bit and they're going to say their bit and they're going to put something out with a veneer for, public consumption. And that veneer didn't exist on WTF. And I heard these people who I had admired for so long, these really talented, funny people who in my mind were successful, being sad and being comfortable with their upset and their disappointments. I remember there was like Dave Foley came on and was really vulnerable in that, and obviously like the Louis C.K. ones and stuff. And that helped me get past this point in my life where I was really, really bummed out. I was like, and it was funny too, because it was like, oh, this person I admire, they're just as sad as me. that it was so helpful. And I even wrote, I wrote Marc a fan letter, which he was kind enough to write back in those early days, and feeling that connection was just huge for me at that time.
Yeah, I think that the number one response that we get from people, the most consistent response that we get from people is this show made me feel less alone. Yeah. And, Marc and I have both said we'll continue to do the show as long as we can if that is still a response, because if you can do that for even a few people, it's amazing. And so if it's got a large enough audience that wants to return to it, there must be something in this show that makes people feel less alone, and it can be even just in a good way, right? Like you're driving around in your car and you just want to fill that empty space. Well, instead of filling it with music or sports, you're going to fill it with these two people having a conversation about life. And that, to me, is great. I love that we can make that contribution.
So thank you for WTF. It's very much appreciated. But in fact, we are not just here to talk about WTF. We're also here to talk about a great movie. And I have to say, we always, when we're going to have a guest on, we ask them, come up with a list of 5 or 10 films, and we'll try to figure out one that we all fit on. Frequently, those lists have at least 2 or 3 that John and I go, well, we're never going to do that movie. You sent us an absolutely fantastic list where we probably want to do just about all of them. But the one we settled on was Paul Verhoeven's 1990 classic, Total Recall, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm so excited about talking about it. Brendon, can you tell us how you first came to this film?
Oh, well, first came to the film, it's just because of living in America in 1990, and being 11 years old, right? So that was the absolute perfect way to come to the film. And, as someone who grew up as totally an Arnold guy, this was a big moment. Arnold was in the culture and in the consciousness, all through my childhood. We were aware of him as the bodybuilder guy. We were aware of him as Conan. We were aware of him as the Terminator. Even if as a little kid, I wasn't watching those things, I totally knew who Arnold was. And I absolutely watched Predator, probably too young, but I don't know. Is 8 or 9 too young for Predator? Maybe, maybe not. It kind of depends. I know that we just loved it. That was one of the great moments of my life was watching Predator for the first time. And same with The Running Man. And just, I just loved Arnold. I was, big into the aesthetic of Arnold, which, as you've heard from me talk about on WTF, I'm a big wrestling fan. I was a wrestling fan back then of the Hulkamania era. I was a big A-Team fan. I liked Rocky movies, right? So all those things that were, somewhat looking back on it, antiquated forms of masculinity and the big superheroes. Arnold, though, was the best of all of it because, as I'll get into many times as we talk about Total Recall, he has always, from minute one, been onto himself. Arnold is one of the greatest, most self-aware movie stars we've ever had. And I think that it's even more remarkable that Total Recall got made with Arnold as the star when you know how keyed into himself Arnold is. It on its face seems like it should just fail, completely fail. If you hear the premise, if you knew the Philip K. Dick story, if you heard about the long process of this movie coming to the screen, there's no reason it should have worked with Arnold. But Arnold knew. He chased it for years and he wanted to make this movie, and he had enough knowledge of himself to know it was going to work. And, I remember it coming out. I remember being in the movie theater for Back to the Future 3 and seeing the trailer for this in front of Back to the Future 3. And it was going to come out the next week. And I'm like, I am there. I am going to go see it. I did not see it in the theater. No one would take me to it as an R-rated movie, but I saw it as soon as it was on VHS. And then just watched it a ton over and over and over again. So I had a very deep and early connection to this movie. Recently, we had Arnold on WTF. He was on last October, and we did a bonus episode about it. And I got to list my top 5 Arnold movies. And this was very easy to rank as number 1. 2, 3, 4, and 5 were much harder, as was keeping ones out of the top 5. That was probably the hardest thing to decide, what doesn't rank. But Total Recall is definitely my favorite Arnold movie. And even if I don't think it's Arnold's best movie, if that makes sense, obviously, I think the filmmaking and skill of Terminator 2 ranks as high as any bit of action cinema that exists. But I think Total Recall is the movie that allowed him to be the most Arnold, right? Terminator 2 has a bit of a governor on him because he's a robot. And the great thing about Total Recall is he gets to be the action star, but he also gets to be vulnerable. He gets to be funny. He gets to play across and opposite different types of temperatures of actors, right? It's not just all him being the domineering robot. It's him playing against the guy who plays the doctor and playing against the guy who plays the salesman at Recall. Like it's something you don't typically get in Arnold movies, is these little pastiches of Arnold as an actor. And I just find it so awesome. I love watching him in this movie.
It was funny. One of the reactions I had in watching it this time, I was like, is this Arnold's best acting? Like,
oh, I think it is.
Yeah. There's really like, because it's Arnold, you know, and Arnold is always Arnold. John, do you remember how you first came to Total Recall?
Well, listen, Brendon took all my story, so I don't know what I can add to it. Yeah, I mean, he's exactly right. I'm also an 80s kid. I was just maybe a couple years older than Brendon, or maybe a few years older than Brendon when this came out. And I was a massive Arnold guy because, you know, the 1980s is when you come with Arnold. And I was, discovered weightlifting in the middle of the 80s. So I had the Arnold workout book that I would use to learn how to lift weights. Then I loved watching him and Stallone battling through the 80s, was so awesome, and which is covered so well in both the Stallone documentary and the Arnold documentary that are out on Netflix for you all that you guys have to watch. It's incredible companion pieces. And so, yes, I knew of Arnold. I respected Arnold. I loved Arnold, the Austrian Oak. I had Muscle and Fitness subscription because of him, the Joe Weider stuff. And the wrestling, as Brendon mentioned, all of that was such a big deal. But he's so right what Brendon says. There was a charm. You know, Stallone, he had Rocky. That was already established. But there was something about Schwarzenegger's charm. You wanted to be friends with him. You wanted to cheer for him. Even when he was stumbling around or the English wasn't perfect or the acting wasn't 100% great, you were still on board with him because he had this confident energy. You wanted that energy. You wish you had that energy as a young kid growing up. So you went with him. And then Total Recall is, I compare Arnold to like the Beatles. Like there's a 7 to 8, 9 year window where you see the progression of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Total Recall is about the beginning of the prime, right? When we get to the, what do you call it? The Sgt. Pepper years, right? This is where Arnold becomes Arnold, not just vehicle Arnold, but good actor Arnold, challenging Arnold, great movies Arnold, right up until True Lies. And then it becomes a law of diminishing returns after that. But from like Total Recall to True Lies is where you get peak Arnold in terms of acting and great movies. So this is the beginning of it. And that's what I love about Total Recall. Going back and watching the remastered version in preparation for this podcast was such an exciting thrill because it'd been a few years. And to remember this guy at his full peak and confidence throughout the movie and swagger, I think was great. So I remember seeing it opening night with a bunch of friends, definitely having a blast, always imitating Arnold, quoting all the lines, but also being challenged by the film because Verhoeven was also the big name at this time as well. So how is he challenging us with these films around this time as well? So it was a great combo of two artists coming together at the right time to make a film like this.
So I will now tell my version of the exact same story that both of you told. I mean, so first of all, as the oldest person here, I graduated college in 1991. So but in my apartment with my roommate Jeff, we would go to the video store to rent stuff. There was always 3 movies multiple times over the weekend. And it was often, are we going to do Raw Deal and Commando? Absolutely. Is it going to be Running Man and Terminator? Sure, why not? Arnold and a lot of Conan. Arnold came through. We watched those movies over and over again. And it was at that era where I didn't care that Raw Deal is a stupid movie. I loved Arnold. And it was great. I just loved it all. And then I cannot say enough about how big a movie RoboCop was for me. RoboCop was like, particularly in this era, I'm reading Frank Miller comic books that are just the ultra violent kind of thing. And then RoboCop comes out. And that is for me at, I think it's 87. So I'm like 18 years old. That is everything that I'm into in terms of movies at that time. So hearing that I'm going to get Arnold and the guy who made RoboCop, I was there opening day at the Cinerama Dome, not the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles, the one in Concord. And I remember seeing it and just being totally blown away and being furious at the ending. And here's the thing. I can't actually remember what I was furious about. Like, I literally going like, wait, was I mad because it was too much this way or too much that way? Like, I literally have no idea. I'm not furious about the ending anymore. But I didn't. John, did you see it in the theater?
I did. Yes, I saw it in the theater with a bunch of friends. I remember at that time we went and saw it in the theaters. I'm sure it was opening night, if not opening day, and just absolutely loved it. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed. And I agree with everything you just said, Steve, for sure.
So a little bit of pre-production. Of course, this is based on a Philip K. Dick story, which was We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which I had a collection of the audiobooks of Philip K. Dick, and I was like, oh, I'll listen to it, because I knew it wasn't very long. It's a 23-page story. And then I ended up listening to all of the collection of audiobooks, including the one that becomes Minority Report and Paycheck. And the thing I found about, I think Philip K. Dick is the most consistently great science fiction idea writer of just like, not that he's the greatest writer in the world. He's not. But the ideas, because he, of course, is who's behind the movie Paycheck, The Adjustment Bureau, Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, and, of course, Blade Runner, all come from Philip K. Dick stories. And they're all stories that deal with things that we have here, like memory and do we have a soul and what does that mean, and identity and those kinds of things. And this short story was in a collection in a magazine, and it was bought by a couple of USC film students, Ronald Schwarzenegger and Dan O'Bannon, for $1,000 in 1974. They tried to write it, and this story, we've had other stories of development hell on the Cine-Files. This is like the craziest one since, I would say, Tootsie, which is also just a ridiculous story of development hell. They sit down and try to write it. They struggle with it. They could never agree on the third act. They try to sell it, and everyone goes, look, this is just too big. It's too expensive. We can't do it. So they gave up on Total Recall and decided to write a little script called Alien. So Alien does pretty well for them. They get a development deal over at Disney, and they pull out this Total Recall script, and Disney goes, great, put together a $20 million budget. And then the whole thing fell apart because they had problems with the third act, which is what they argued about initially. And so Disney says, we don't want anything to do with this thing anymore. And they sell the project to Mr. Dino De Laurentiis in 1982, a storied producer of film and a very interesting personality. And he goes, I got the perfect director for this. David Cronenberg comes on to the movie. He liked the movie, but he felt it had third act problems. This seems to haunt this film a lot. He wrote 12 drafts over the next year, and then he comes into a lot of conflict with Dino De Laurentiis, because Dino De Laurentiis wants this to be a fun adventure like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And now, gentlemen, if you think fun adventure like Raiders of the Lost Ark, would you hire David Cronenberg to do this movie?
So wait, 1982, what is Cronenberg coming off of that makes him, that gives him the attention that they think, because this is also right around the time that De Laurentiis must be developing Dune with Lynch, right?
Yep. Well, that's part of this story, because Dino De Laurentiis is going to do a huge movie, and then Dune bombs, and then he decides to cut the budget in like half, because he's like, oh, people don't want big science fiction movies.
Yeah, he's coming off of Scanners in 82.
Okay. So I guess that's probably the thing, right? It's like, okay, this guy, he's heady and he can handle sci-fi concepts and do it with style.
Yeah, definitely style, but certainly not fun adventure.
No.
And naturally, so he wants to make it darker, and so he wants it to star William Hurt.
Yeah.
And Dino De Laurentiis
coming off of Altered States, which is like 1981 as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And Dino De Laurentiis, they go to Jeff Bridges, who turns it down, and Christopher Reeve they were interested in. And finally they cast Richard Dreyfuss.
Great choice. I love it.
I mean, what's funny about it is that is the right choice for this role.
Yeah, if you just listen to the audiobook, Steve, you could very easily picture Richard Dreyfuss as that character.
Yeah.
Because the character of Quail at the time, not Quaid, is an ineffectual clerk who has these fantasies, but the fantasies are the total opposite of his life.
Yeah.
Is how this story should work.
Right.
You know
if he's a one word descriptor, he's a nebbish.
So naturally, Cronenberg quits. He says, I'm out. I can't agree on the casting. I can't agree on the tone. Dino De Laurentiis threatens to sue him because he's under contract. And finally, what he got was an agreement from him that at some point down the line, you will direct another movie for me. So Cronenberg leaves, and then Dune bombs. And so he cuts the budget of Total Recall. And then he goes back to David Cronenberg and say, hey, listen, you remember that movie that you agreed to do to me in the future? What if that movie was Total Recall? and he even says, look, and we can do it your way and we can make it darker just as long as it's a smaller budget. And at this point, Cronenberg's like, no, I'm done.
Yeah.
So now it's 1988 and De Laurentiis brings in Bruce Beresford to direct the film.
Wow.
It gets greenlit. And would you like to know who was cast to play the role of Quail?
I think I know, but I'm going to let you say so I don't spoil it.
It's well, you could spoil it if you wanted to. It's someone John and I just did a watch along of a little movie called Roadhouse, and the star of Total Recall was going to be Patrick Swayze.
Swayze.
I think they actually like put the whole thing into production, and and then it went into turnaround.
Yeah, no, they had built sets in Australia. They spent $8 million. They were just about to start filming the movie when De Laurentiis goes bankrupt.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's happening this whole time is Arnold finds out about this movie when it's at Disney in the early 80s, or maybe when it first went to Dino De Laurentiis. So he goes to Dino and says, I want to be in this movie. And Dino goes, you're totally wrong for this movie for all the reasons that we just said. And Arnold came back multiple times. And so the moment that he went into, he became bankrupt, one of the first calls he got was from Arnold saying, hey, I bet you could use a little bit of cash. How do you feel about selling Total Recall? He goes to his the producers at Coralco, which he had done Red Heat and other movies for, and said, hey, I want you guys to buy this Total Recall thing from Dino. They do. And it sounds like Arnold, listening to all the behind the scenes stuff on this, Arnold really shepherded this. I mean, it's not just an Arnold. He starred in this movie. This is an Arnold production, you know.
It's as close as you could call a dream project for him. Like he was chasing it for years. And again, it's this like self-possessed quality he has to just no, that's me. Like he had this thing that was a script based on the Philip K. Dick story, not what it got reworked as once it went to Coralco. It was the original one where Richard Dreyfuss made the most sense for the part, and he still saw how it would work for him. That's the most remarkable thing about his pursuit of this movie.
Yeah, you could argue that it doesn't happen without him. Like, no way do we have this movie without him, because of what I'm sure you're going to get into in a little bit here, Steve, as well. He is chasing this thing, but he's pushing for certain people to be involved in order to make this movie happen.
So the other thing is that Arnold loved RoboCop. He went to see RoboCop. He thought that was the best movie ever. Apparently, he first met Paul Verhoeven when he saw him eating in a restaurant and came running up and interrupted his meal to tell him, this is fantastic, and you have to, and we have to do a movie. Yeah, I can't do an Arnold impression. That was a terrible mistake. But but he knew, and as soon as he gets the rights to Total Recall, he goes after Verhoeven.
Well, another part of this is that he had been in talks to star in RoboCop, but I
didn't know that.
The outfit was too. They essentially realized that the outfit was too big to create for him, and he didn't feel that the film 100% became what it became later. He didn't sense that from the initial reactions to it, so Arnold didn't do it. But he wanted to work with Verhoeven after he saw how RoboCop turned out.
Yeah, and I think then he was also influenced a lot. I don't know the chronology of whether he saw this before or after RoboCop, but he had seen Flesh and Blood. Is that the name of Verhoeven's other movie?
Yes.
That he felt the tone of that was what he wanted to apply to Total Recall as well. The way he handled the violence, the way he handled the darkness of it. And it's just very funny when you know that like Paul Verhoeven's career prior to this were these small Dutch films, you know, very kind of quiet, studious pieces. And then he becomes this, you know, action blockbuster director.
Verhoeven brings in Gary Goldman to do some rewrites on the script, and Gary Goldman wrote another movie that was in that VHS rotation at that era of my life, which we did years ago on the Cine-Files, which is Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes.
There have essentially at this point been 30 versions of the script. Verhoeven, what he says is that he read all of them and then highlighted, I like this one, this moment from this one, this moment from this one. He handed that huge stack of scripts with notes to Gary Goldman. What's interesting, by the way, in listening to the commentary, it's also very clear that Paul Verhoeven never read the original short story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I just find interesting. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's a small short story. There's not a lot, to it. And of course, because Arnold's on the project, they had to make changes to the script. One of the changes, by the way, is to change the name of Quail to Quaid to avoid association with the current Vice President of the United States, Dan Quayle.
Ironic, considering Arnold is a lifelong Republican, but yeah, makes sense.
And there's also Ron Miller, who's one of the conceptual artists. He did a ton of designs, and designs. The two big things that that really got this movie greenlit, sounds like, are Arnold and designs,
Well, and both of those things, the finished product is there on the screen because Arnold is awesome in it, and the designs are just impeccable. Like that you've never seen Mars look as good as this. Even in like The Martian, which is a contemporary film, it just, those sets, those miniatures, and the matte paintings, they look so great.
I didn't realize until digging into this movie, this is like a huge budget. I mean, the production is ginormous on this thing.
Yep.
So it's 25 years after they bought the rights to this story. There have been 7 directors attached, 4 different writers, 40 scripts, and finally Total Recall goes into production in April of '89. It was filmed, by the way, at Estudios Churubusco in Mexico City. It was on 45 sets on 10 different sound stages simultaneously. I mean, they took over the whole studio. It's crazy. I also think, I don't know if you guys have this. My guess is you kind of do. Seeing that Carolco logo at the beginning of the film, that meant something to me at that.
Oh,
era.
hell yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's like seeing Canon Films for me, or Orion. Immediately I get a tinge of joy and nostalgia.
Yeah. Speaking of which, shall we get into the film?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
Absolutely. I should say, you mentioned commentary. I will say that prior to this, I recently watched one of my prized possessions, which is the DVD special edition of this that came in a circular tin that looks like Mars. And it has the Verhoeven and Schwarzenegger commentary on it, which I think should be a way we get movies made now. That don't have anything to do with those two guys. They just pay them to come do the commentary of the film, because the commentary is largely like, the audio assisted tracks that you see on sometimes, like if they have someone describing the visual action for people who might be vision impaired. It's just that, but Arnold explaining what you're seeing on the screen at any given moment. And it brings me such joy to experience the movie like that.
Well, he's so excited about it. I mean,
everything, like he's seeing it for the first time.
Have you listened to, it's the same thing. It's John Milius and him on the Conan commentary track.
Oh, I've heard like the highlights of it. Yes.
It is hilarious. I think Arnold must be stoned. They must both be stoned. It is so funny, but it's exactly what you described. Which it's funny because I totally enjoy the commentary track. It's not that useful for me because I know what's happening in the movie.
Yeah,
I want, like, behind the scenes and what's going on, so I can put it in.
No, if you want to know what's happening on the screen right now, it's perfectly useful.
So the movie starts and we get that pounding music from Jerry Goldsmith.
Amazing.
You know, I never thought about it, but this might be one of his best scores, and that's saying a lot because I love a lot of his scores.
He said in numerous interviews that this is one of his favorite scores ever. So that's high praise for someone like him.
Well, I got to say, as soon as it started, and you're right, you saw that Carolco logo, and that was a great little, jolt of energy. But just the music kicking in and the opening credits, which are pretty understated, sci-fi terms, but still cool. And they have this, red glow to them and that. But the thumping music coming in and how great it is. And I realized, it's not like next gen Star Trek in terms of like a Goldsmith theme, right? You're not like going to walk out of the theater humming it, but if you played 3 notes of the Total Recall score, I'd be like, oh, Total Recall's on somewhere. Like I would instantly know it. And it is just immediately evoking of a certain mood, a certain type of movie that was made at a certain time in Hollywood that we don't get anymore. And it just like I was in. I was like, you strapped me to the chair just like Quaid. I was in with the first 3 seconds of this movie.
So apparently, Verhoeven always wanted to work with Jerry Goldsmith. Couldn't afford him when he did Flesh and Blood. Still couldn't afford him when he did RoboCop. And it was only now that he finally had the money in the budget to bring Jerry Goldsmith in. And then I'll just say what was weird is I'm listening to the score. I went, oh man, this score kind of reminds me of the Conan the Barbarian score, which is Basil Polidorus. And then I went and there's on the Blu-ray, I think there's a documentary about Jerry Goldsmith and the music. And they said he was inspired by the Conan store in Basil Polidorus. And I was like, oh, wow. I got that one right.
That you just keyed into something, though, that everyone generally working on this film was able to do, whether they were doing it consciously or not. They worked within Arnold's framework, right? So, like, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, multiple times when you get into, like, the fight scenes in this movie. Like, Vic Armstrong, who was the stunt coordinator and second unit director who had doubled Arnold a lot, knew how he could fight, right? He knew the general parameters of Arnoldville, right? He knew what neighborhood they were in. So he could do that. And it's the same with this. Okay, we're going to make a score for this. What could it sound like? Oh, I know. Arnold's first breakout role, like that is in the consciousness. Use that.
The film starts with On the Red Planet, a beautiful matte painting, which we'll have over and over and over again in this film. These gorgeous, gorgeous matte paintings. We see 2 people. This is shot, by the way, on a tiny stage when they're totally out of money at this point, trying to make this thing work. It's very tender. They touch hands, and then the guy falls. The glass on his faceplate breaks, and then his tongue starts bulging. His eyes start bulging. This is an Arnold puppet, and I find it totally convincing. And then it's the classic wake up from the nightmare. And there is Arnold in bed with Sharon Stone.
Future Basic Instinct actress Sharon Stone there for Verhoeven. I love the beginning because it's such an unusual beginning for a sci-fi film. Right off the bat to put your lead into this kind of a situation. But the fact that the lead is Arnold Schwarzenegger, the audience already comes in with an understanding of who this person is. So you don't have to spend too much time developing. So you put him immediately in danger so that you're on this side and there's a mystery here and you want to figure it out. And you start with a little bit of a comical when things are going around. Things are going crazy for him as he's hit this faceplate, which I think is brilliant. And then the wake up, and then you see the size of this man. What it must be like to be in bed with the size of this man as he gets up in frame. It's so
like when he sits up, does half the bed go down? Like, is it?
They have a powerful cantilever system built into any Arnold bed to support it. Obviously, we find out he's had many dreams about Mars, and she gives him a kiss and holds him, and it's very tender.
My poor baby. This is getting to be an obsession.
And she kisses him, and her head moves past his in a hug, and then her face is kind of looking towards camera. And I think this is the very first moment where, particularly, this is a movie you're going to watch multiple times. Yeah. You go, wait, do I trust her? Is this for real? Right at this beginning.
Right, because you can choose to read that as being conniving or some type of duplicity, or you could just read it as jealousy, that she is thinking in her head, wait, he must have been dreaming about that brunette again. And I think it's something Verhoeven says on that commentary track is that he wanted to make sure every step of this movie made sense both ways. You could have it make sense in the reality that you're seeing as it's presented. This is a guy who, goes on this fantastical adventure because has a memory implant or whatever, or it's all the recalled dream. And he wants you to think at every moment it could be either one.
Yeah, people might think I'm crazy, but
I do.
Fair point. A companion piece to this film that I think would be great, and I just by happenstance watched it 2 days ago. The Truman Show is an interesting comparison watch with Total Recall.
I got it written down right at the very next thing I was going to say to you.
Really?
Because it was this scene in particular, John. It was she was acting like Laura Linney acts to Truman.
That's right. Trying to keep him from something, trying to steer him a certain way, and later when we get to the construction site, that's essentially
Noah Emmerich.
Noah Emmerich, yeah, him trying to steer Truman in a certain direction. So you're getting I have to feel the Truman Show was a little bit influenced by Total Recall because some of these beats are very similar when you watch these two movies back to back.
Totally. It happens a few times in this movie for other movies, like not just the Truman Show, but there's, the Bourne Identity crops up in here, which I get the
notes.
I mean, like, I get that the Ludlum books already existed, but the visual sense of Matt Damon turning into Jason Bourne when he didn't realize he was, is that scene that's coming up with him and his coworker Harry. And then you've got a very overt Matrix scene coming up later on with a literal red pill. So it's just like the influence of this movie, I think, is underrated. I don't hear it mentioned as much as I think it actually applied to people's mindset particularly around memory films, around films involving identity and self-discovery. There's a lot of Total Recall out there.
I just have to say, the fact that both of you have the Truman Show listed at the same moment, and you and I both have Bourne Identity listed at the same moment. I think I said this in the email that I wrote to you, Brendon, but when I heard you talking about Scorsese back in December, whenever it was, I immediately texted John and wrote, "He's one of us."
One of us. One of us.
And as you said, Brendon, she asked,
Was she there?
Who?
The one you told me about. The brunette.
and he laughs it off and says she's jealous of a dream. And then there's this moment where first she's kind of play slapping at him, and then she's really hitting him.
Yeah.
And goes,
It's not funny. Doctor, dream about her every night.
Here I went, oh, she is either a jealous wife or she's a spy trying to get information because she knows who that brunette is.
Right.
Or she legitimately has feelings for him, which Michael Ironside gets a little shit for from his buddy there when they're getting into the car after the whole thing's falling apart, that she actually is legitimately jealous and not playing the jealous wife, but legitimately jealous of this guy and the dreams he's having, which might be an angle she's playing as well.
By the way, speaking of, Arnold's just ginormousness, is like, okay, you get assigned to be married to, who am I assigned to be married to? That guy?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then they kind of wrestle around and we get romantic, and then she undoes her top a little bit, which, for me in 1990 was perfectly good. But apparently Sharon Stone refused to do any nudity. And in the commentary track, Paul Verhoeven makes a joke about how he got his revenge on her in Basic Instinct. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Oh, the Dutch. Leaky Dutch. Anyway,
it's a little later. We're in the kitchen. He's making a smoothie. And by the way, I always try to figure good places to put pieces of information in. I couldn't find a really good place to put this information in, but it's food related. So I thought I'll bring it up here, which is basically, it was filmed in Mexico, and essentially every single person on the crew and cast got food poisoning except Arnold, because Arnold had all of his food flown in because of bad experiences he had on Predator. And so he didn't get food poisoning.
That's right. I remember now. Predator was filmed in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. That was where I honeymooned. And I was like, wait a minute, Predator was made here?
I'm going there in 2 weeks for a week, Puerto Vallarta, and try it out for the first time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the other part of this is that Verhoeven had food poisoning through the entire filming of the movie.
Wow.
And so he couldn't miss a day, because if he missed a day, he was going to get docked by the studio, his pay for that day. They kind of had him in a little bit of a bind. So he was powering through directing the whole movie with food poisoning.
Oh my God.
And had ambulances on call for certain days when it was really bad for him, to put fluids in him or to be able to transport him if they needed to. So more power to Verhoeven for even making the movie.
Look, I can handle pain. I can handle like being sick, I am the biggest wimp when it comes to food poisoning or nausea. I can't imagine having to work. Oh my God, terrible. And then we see a news report. And first of all, the news report is on a flat screen wall, which in 1990, this is very, very cool technology.
Yeah.
And more violence last night on Mars, where terrorists demanding independence once again halted the extraction of turbinium ore.
And we see this gun battle going on Mars.
The most violent thing you've ever seen on the news ever.
Yeah. Well, and that the next line is that they say, Mars restored order with minimal use of force. And we're literally seeing them shoot people.
And the cops are like going up to the camera going like, turn that the fuck off. And like right on the local news.
Well, this is the weird thing. And it's obviously, a huge part of RoboCop. It's part of Starship Troopers is this weird, hyper violent, but funny thing that Paul Verhoeven, there's this line tightrope that he walks, which I think for us was obviously successful. And for a lot of people, it turns them away. The violence, there's a huge body count in this movie. It's very violent. And this is a thing I don't think we have anymore, which is the political, sarcastic, comedic, hyper-violent kind of film. That's just not a thing that people do anymore,
Well, there was just something about a foreign director being able to kind of fly under the radar of, American imperialism and make fun of it to its face, right? Like basically all the things that were joked about in Europe about guys like Arnold, frankly, and Sylvester Stallone and Ronald Reagan and the entire, 1980s American experience was then in the Verhoeven blockbusters, and you could basically call this a trilogy if you go from RoboCop to Total Recall to Starship Troopers. It's like this is all like him putting back in the face the things he finds ridiculous about Americans and knows, though, that Americans love it. And so he's like, oh, you like this stuff? Here, I'll show you when a guy gets shot. We're going to run across the dead body, and I'll put a focal point on it, right?
Well, and it's so funny, too, because Kuroko is First Blood and Rambo, and I think there is a direct connection. Rambo takes itself extremely seriously, and I think Verhoeven is having a lot of fun with that.
And that was Arnold, too. And I mean, like, that's the big divide between Arnold and Stallone. I mean, like, I could go on about that for days, about the two of them, but that is ultimately the dividing point between those guys. Stallone's dour self-seriousness and Arnold's playful self-awareness. And, you get to pick and choose throughout the 80s which temperature you want, which mood you want. And for Arnold and Verhoeven, their sensibilities just align so perfectly.
Yeah, it's perfect because Stallone is, I'm going to prove you wrong. Schwarzenegger is just this effortless confidence.
That's right.
And
Stallone right down to Rocky itself, that he was like, if I'll bury this in the yard and let the worms eat it if you don't let me star in it, right? So like it's intrinsic in his psyche, right? It's the Stallone mentality of like, I am going to run up the steps and win, right? Yeah. And Arnold's just like the guy who's like, I can't believe this. It's like I'm coming every time I lift weights.
Exactly.
So, and I will say that I won't give my opinion on this because John and I actually did an entire Cinephile short talking about that Arnold and Sly doc, and you can find that on patreon.com/thecine-files right now and listen to a long conversation. Brendon mirrors very much exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, very nice. Well, I'm glad I could tee that up for you.
Thank you very much.
No wonder you're having nightmares. You're always watching the news.
And I love that she hits the remote. And if we didn't think that it was cool to have this square flat screen, now the whole wall is a flat screen. And what I love is the way that they did this, which is that this is a blue screen. It's not rear projection. And what they did was the wallpaper on that wall is also not there. It's all just a blue screen so that they just make the wallpaper disappear when they switch to the image of this mountain stream, which is much nicer.
Let's do it.
Do what?
Move to Mars.
And she is not into that idea.
Sweetheart, we've been through this a million times. You'd hate it on Mars. It's dry, it's ugly, it's boring. I mean, really. Revolution could break out there any second.
And he says, which I find interesting,
Cohagen says it's just a few extremists.
So at this moment, he's believing the news that is being sold to him, you know? And she goes romantically to sit on his lap and starts to talk about, hey, why don't we go take a nice trip to Saturn? And while this is going on in the background, we're hearing the news report, and they talk about something about alien artifacts. Again, it goes into where does the reality that we're going to get to come from, you know? And I love, by the way, that it ends that we get a promo for the World Series in Tokyo on ESPN. I think that's a great, like, little futurist detail.
Oh, yeah.
Laurie, don't you understand? I feel like I was meant for something more than this. I want to do something with my life. I want to be somebody.
You are somebody. You're the man I love.
And they kiss, and she says, have a nice day, and heads out. And then the camera lingers on her, and there is just a look.
Yeah.
So I one of the things I'm curious about with this movie is what actually are his memories at this moment? Like, so they moved to a new town, and maybe what they did was the story of moving to a new town. That's when his life in this life started, if he is in fact a spy.
Well, she mentions to him a little later that she's only known him for it's either 6 or 8 weeks.
6 weeks.
So, like, I wonder if that's the thing, because if they're saying it's a new town, it's like somewhere within that period they've dropped him into this space, and everything before this is implanted.
Yeah.
Here's my question about these memory implants. If we're doing the story that he actually is a spy.
Sure.
Does Quaid, as he's lying in bed with this woman, have genuine feelings of love for Laurie?
Well, okay, I guess my answer to that is it depends on what you think Quaid is.
Well, this is exactly. Yes.
Right? Because Quaid's a great character. And, I figured there's probably plenty of places we could talk about this, but to tee it off here, like, if you take it at the premise, as the premise presents, that, he is a Hauser who has had his memory taken out, and Quaid's the implant of this new character, persona. And so Quaid is an artificial construct. It's artificial consciousness. Yeah. So essentially you have a robot or data, right? Trying to navigate new emotions and new feelings, because these are not supposed to be things they programmed him with. He wasn't supposed to be programmed with this yearning to go to Mars. And so something within the Quaid program has decided to make that happen, to make these things that are interesting him. And it's much like Truman, right? In the Truman Show, he is somehow being pulled toward this vision of the woman he loves and being in Fiji and this world that exists beyond the thing that's been constructed for him with no other input. There's no other input in that, environment that they create for the Truman Show. And it's the same with Quaid. Quaid gets nothing other than what has been implanted. So anything else that he's, creating in there is something brand new that the artificial intelligence is creating itself.
And I think, like everything in this movie, everything they're doing is imperfect. So why wouldn't their implanting of new memories be imperfect and flawed as well? And it also brings to mind another Jim Carrey movie, and that's Eternal Sunshine. He is drawn to Montauk. He is drawn to Clementine for whatever reason. The same thing, Arnold, even in Quaid in his dreams, is drawn to Mars and drawn to the Rachel Ticotin character. As we see later, he prefers blondes. He prefers brunettes rather, and he prefers Lizzie Demure. So clearly, no matter how much they've implanted in him, he's not 100% fully converted. And I think those moments, there's no chemistry between him and Sharon Stone. And I think that's on purpose, to be honest.
Yes, it's fake chemistry. It's a rote line, like "You're the woman of my dreams," delivered with all the robotic finesse of Arnold as the Terminator.
Right, and when you asked me if he does not love his wife, he knows that he's supposed to, but he doesn't feel that, and I think that's what I sense coming out of that scene when you asked the question.
Well, this is what's so weird about it, is that he has these memories of a relationship and a wedding and a sexy honeymoon, and he's with this person. And so they've inserted these feelings, but then he's not feeling the things that are connected to those memories. You know what I mean?
But
Like,
if you go from the idea too that this is just a guy who then goes to a place that can implant a memory, and that then from that point on the rest of the movie is just exactly what the ego trip is as laid out, well, you can apply that to these early scenes too. This is a guy unhappy with his life in a marriage that actually doesn't have authentic love, which can be possible, even if they're gorgeous people like Sharon Stone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is not connecting. And so he goes into this dream and finds within the dream who he really wants to be. I see them both as absolutely valid.
By the way, one other thing that occurred to me as you guys were talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is I suddenly went, oh, Charlie Kaufman has to be a big Philip K. Dick fan.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
He has to be.
That, totally.
Because it's all the same kind of mindfuckery, going on. We walk through this busy area. This is shot, by the way, at this section at a military academy in Mexico City. One of the things they were looking for when they were trying to figure out what this movie would look like was an architectural style. And what they found was an architectural style called brutalism, which is this, mid-century, huge concrete, very imposing, very institutional looking things. And it is not, this world that we're in, that Quaid inhabits, is not friendly. It is cold. It is dark. It is, brutalism is the right word for it, And then we go through the X-ray machine. And it's so cool. And this is early CGI. Verhoeven says that this is the first CGI that's ever in a movie, which it isn't. We've talked about other ones, including the Genesis effect in Wrath of Khan, but this one is really cool. And so to do it, they needed to they filmed the actual people walking through what you would see from the other side of the actual people walking through the X-ray thing, and then they wanted to do motion capture on Arnold. And so they had one day scheduled with Arnold, and they said, okay, we got to get him dressed all in black. And this is the early motion capture. We're going to put all these white balls on him. Arnold shows up in a white t-shirt and shorts. And they say, Arnold, we need you all in black. And he says, this is what I'm wearing. And they're like, okay, we can't argue with him. And they do the motion capture. But they're worried because they don't have the contrast with the black between that and the white balls. And they send it off to the motion capture company, who says, this is fantastic. It's great. No problem. We'll totally make this work. 3 weeks later, they get a call back saying, hey, about making that motion capture work, we can't do it. Apparently the white outfit was too much. And they said, the best we could do is a cycle, which means basically the same step repeated over and over and over again. Yeah. And then they go, well, I guess we're going to try to rotoscope it. So they rotoscoped this by hand, every frame by frame. And they said the only reason they were able to do it was because he was in white. If he had been in the black, they wouldn't be able to rotoscope because they wouldn't have clean edges that they could see, which I just found all of that really interesting. And of course, the best part of going through that X-ray machine is the guy with the seeing eye dog. Which apparently on the take Verhoeven that seeing eye dog actually stopped to relieve itself mid-take, so they had to invent the rest of the movement. And we get on a train, and they're playing on the train is a commercial for REKALL.
Do you dream of a vacation at the bottom of the ocean, but you can't float the bill? Have you always wanted to climb the mountains of Mars, but now you're over the hill?
The actor is Roy Brocksmith, and this is true throughout this movie. There's so many people who have been in a million things. Mm-hmm. And this guy is one of them. He's in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. He's in Arachnophobia, Picket Fences, tons and tons and tons of TV. And this is where we first hear about this idea of getting a memory instead of taking a vacation.
It's crazy to watch this film now in 2024, isn't it? When we have dueling VR headsets, when we have something like Apple Vision Pro that just came out. I know, Steve, we did a short on it as well, where we explored it. And the idea of we're not that far away of being able to implant an actual full experience that is as real as all your senses would have it feel if they were actually there doing it and experiencing it. So it's fascinating to watch. I don't know if these movies influence technology or if technology influences movies. It's a real chicken and the egg situation when you see some of this nowadays. And especially when you watch Minority Report and see what we can do now with screens and move stuff around. Oh, yeah. It's mind-blowing. And of course, it goes all the way back to Star Trek as well. There was that whole book about did Star Trek influence the future of technology, or did technology influence Star Trek? So it's also fascinating to watch now in 2024.
So we arrive at work, which is at a construction site. And as you mentioned, Brendon, the second unit director is Vic Armstrong. This is one of the things that he filmed. And we see Arnold on the jackhammer with those massive guns.
Of course.
And this is where originally he was an accountant. And when they get Arnold, we're like, no, we can't do that.
Well, not only is that great because Arnold looks good, with a jackhammer, but then the shot as it comes in on the construction site looks like the shot of Mars at the beginning. Right? Like you have all these crags and these, this generally alien landscape, but it's something very familiar to us. And that's something that keeps happening throughout the movie. This idea of doubles, this idea of things happening twice. He walks in on Sharon Stone in a few minutes and she's playing tennis with a hologram. They're doing the same things, right? The idea of your memory of something being similar but different to the thing you're actually looking at. And I didn't really notice that until watching it this time. And I think it was because I was so taken with those earlier shots of Mars that as this happened, I went, wait a minute, they just did the same thing, but it's a giant construction site.
That is a great point. I hadn't thought about that. And we call over to his friend Harry, who is Robert Costanzo, who my guess is, John, this is a guy that you like.
Listen, I love character actors. Like I want to start an entire hall of fame for character actors. Robert Costanzo absolutely deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. If you remember him from Die Hard 2, he's also fantastic in Die Hard 2. He's always great playing off the lead as either a supportive guy, a dumb guy, or a guy against the lead who can't seem to see what's going on. He plays it so well, and having him be his friend here, he looks like he's a construction worker.
Oh, yeah.
Schwarzenegger doesn't look like a construction worker. So to have the dichotomy of these things, I think is fascinating to watch in this opening scene between the two guys. And again, as I said, if you watch Truman Show, this is no Emmerich. This is essentially him saying, like, "Oh, Mars, they'll fry your brain. You don't want to do that." So all of this guiding, and you get these looks as well in this scene where he might be thinking a second thing, or it might be, as Verhoeven said, as you said, Steve, he's directing it both ways, that both things are happening at the same time. And Robert does a great job with these moments. So yeah, I love that he's a part of this movie.
As you said, Quaid asked him about Recall, and I love that he knows the jingle, or he kind of knows it. and Recall. There's two possibilities. By the way, the jingle was written by Jerry Goldsmith. Possibility one is that they hadn't composed the jingle yet, and so Costanza had to just make up something.
Yes.
Possibility two is that he blew it,
Yeah, I go with a hybrid of those possibilities, is that they didn't play it for him. They told him, oh, it's going to sound like this, and sung it or hummed it for him, and then he came up with that.
A recall! 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 Recall!
And what he says is he warns him against going there because he knows a guy who got lobotomized.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, John, it's all about there is a certain amount of time you're supposed to hold on a look. And if you hold on the look a little bit longer, just an extra second or two, suddenly it becomes suspicious.
Right.
We enter this big lobby. He types into a keyboard and Mr. McClane shows up. And I was like,
I got excited for a second.
Gennaro? I mean, like, and he goes up to the recall offices, and the first thing we see is this woman who is changing her nails from blue to red, which is, I think, a CG effect, and it's really cool. In the short story, and this is typical of this era of science fiction, she is changing the color of her breasts, not her nails.
Wow. Okay.
And the actor is Alexia Robinson. She's Nutty Professor, Murder One, Walker, Texas Ranger. Again, a long, long list of credits. And I think she totally checks him out.
Oh, big time. They give you a few seconds to watch her check him out.
Well, and this is something we talked about since the beginning of the Cine-Files, is you have a person with a small part and you give them a little bit. You've given her the nails, and you give her that she, checks out Arnold.
Yeah. Can we take a moment though, Steve? Like, and Brendon, like, he's here.
Yes.
His wife told him not to do this. His buddy at work told him not to do this, but he is just casually walking in. He's going to do it because F them. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so there is no fear. There is no trepidation. He's just walking in and going to do it. I found this to be fascinating when I was watching the movie, that at no point is like, well, maybe I shouldn't, or there's no question. He knows he's somehow drawn to do this, so he's going to do it,
And he gets bought in on in the easiest way on some of the explanations.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so interesting because, again, going like, all right, and obviously we spoil every movie on the Cine-Files. So, he in one scenario, he is an actual spy called Hauser. And this is a reverse mind fuck, in the sense that we find out what Hauser is doing, which is rebelling. And then we later find out that, no, that wasn't the plan at all, that Hauser is actually a bad guy. And so I go like, okay, what this sort of seems to be telling us is that something in Hauser's mind was so strong that the memory cap couldn't actually fully suppress it, and he keeps drawing this guy back to Mars. Right?
Oh, I take it, if you take the idea of Quaid as an artificial consciousness that's been put over, like masking over the capped Hauser consciousness, it's like the bubbling of the Hauser memories underneath the Quaid consciousness is making Quaid intrigued and yearning for it's like Quaid is like a voyeur of Hauser's past life, and he's just been glimpsing these things through the window, and he wants to be it. He wants to be there in Mars with this woman he's taken with.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is later on, when we found out that Hauser's a bad guy, we hear he's got a big house and a Mercedes. And I go, it could be, like, it seems like Hauser is having a great time being a bad guy.
Totally.
He's having way more fun being a bad guy than Quaid is having in his fake marriage and his construction site job being basically a good guy. And so it could be that part of what's drawing him to Mars is that's where he was actually happy.
Yes.
And also where he was actually evil.
Well, and ultimately why Quaid is a true hero, because, as we will vigorously spoil later on, he chooses against that. He chooses to be Quaid.
Right.
And now we meet Bob McLean with a salesman, which is another actor who's been in everything.
And this is like one of the best performances in the movie. Oh, yeah. He's so good in this.
I totally agree.
You were interested in a memory of...
Mars.
Yeah, Mars.
Did a problem?
And this is one of the things I don't understand that doesn't quite make sense to me.
I wrote the same thing down. Why does the guy think Mars is a bad idea?
Why is he not pitching him Mars? Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense, because like we've been saying with Laurie and with Harry, little hesitations and little moments make it suspicious that there's some alternative motive.
I think it's one red herring too many. I think it's just like, it's like they took more cake than they should have, right?
Yeah. Because everything else syncs up really well.
It does.
But this does not. And he tries to sell him on Saturn, which is what Laurie was trying to sell him on. So again, I think it puts your brain in a weird direction. But he insists on Mars, tells him about the basic package, which includes
private cabin on the shuttle, deluxe suite at the Hilton, plus all the major sites, Mount Pyramid, the Grand Canals, and of course, Venusville.
And there's just that little bit of a lascivious look when we hear the word Venusville.
Yeah, but how real does it seem?
As real as any memory in your head.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
No, I'm telling you, Doug, your brain will not know the difference. And that's guaranteed, or your money back.
So let me ask this question here. I'm going to ask this question a couple of times. Okay. But do you like this idea? If someone had this technology where they could give, and you knew it was 100% safe, and you could have an experience without leaving your house, but have the memory of seeing something or experiencing something, are you in?
No.
I say yes.
Yeah. I just very personally, I do not like the idea of remembering something that I didn't do. Especially if something in the memory becomes unpalatable, then now we're going into Eternal Sunshine Land, where I'm trying to get the memory out. Right? Like, imagine you put me in that recall situation and you thought you had me pegged based on my questionnaire, but you put something in there that terrifies me or makes me feel depressed, and now I'm stuck with that as part of your overall package. I'd be really upset.
Well, now we're getting into some really deep shit. Because, I mean, the argument can be made that we have constructed our own reality versus what's actually happening in our lives all the time.
Yes.
So how are we processing that as we live our lives? What's the actual experience you're having versus the experience that did happen objectively? Those are all fascinating things to break down. So for me personally, because I am an experiential person and I like to explore the fringes and the boundaries, I would absolutely do this. And Steve, you know this from my own personality. I would absolutely do this for better or worse. Even if I can't open my eyes for 4 hours, I would absolutely push the boundaries and experience what it would be like to go into something like this. But the danger becomes, as Brendon said, and I think I hadn't thought about, is what if they trigger something in you didn't know they were going to trigger?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work for you? You know, I think of Upgrade, which I thought was one of the best recent sci-fi films. And there's a decision he makes because of the option that is presented to him about what reality he wants to live in. And I think that's where it becomes dangerous. If you're prone to not want to return to the reality you have, having this done to you can be a permanent thing, and you're stuck in this reality, reliving it over and over again if you can't get out of it. So that would be the danger, but I would absolutely try it if it was available. And I think it will be before our lives are over, to be honest with you.
So
with AI and everything.
One of the other podcasts that John's heard me talk about many times that I love is the David Chang podcast. And he has coined this term of, instead of being an outdoorsman, he's an inside man. and that he thinks that there should be, why aren't there magazines for the person who doesn't ever want to leave their house? and because I love the idea of travel, I just find it exhausting. And so, like, on one level, I'm kind of intrigued by this idea. Like, I can stay in indoors. Oh, it's an indoorsman. That's what he calls himself. An indoorsman. I could stay an indoorsman and then also have the memories of eating my way across Italy. That sounds great. Except this whole concept freaks me out, frankly. The whole thing, like, really, because I kind of go like, well, all I am is my memories. You know what I mean? Like, that's my mind. Like, I don't know if you guys had the experience of, like, I've had people, like, did theater in college, and someone would say, hey, remember when we were in that play together? And I'll go, I have no memory of that play. You know, like, you and I acted together. I don't remember that. And that's really upsetting to me, because I'm sort of, well, if I don't remember it, that's like a piece of me that is lost forever. You know what I mean? Yeah. And this is sort of the opposite. It's like, okay, then there'll be a piece of me, but it's not mine. What is it? Like, how would you relate to that experience? You know, that feels real, but didn't happen. I think I don't know. It stresses me out.
Besides, a real holiday is a pain in the butt. You got lost luggage, lousy weather, crooked taxi drivers.
So 2 things about this. One is I wrote, man, this guy's a good salesman.
Oh, totally.
Really good salesman. And the second thing, that list of things, lost luggage, lousy weather, crooked taxi drivers, are all going to happen in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an argument to be made that this is all part of Hauser's plan. This is all part to make this all happen for him to come out of this thing. And maybe even this guy is a part of the whole situation. Either that, or there have been problems on Mars. And there have been problems with that lobotomy that What's-His-Face talks about. Maybe that was the person they went to Mars on their little fantasy trip, and that's what caused the lobotomy. So maybe he thinks Mars is a bit dangerous all around, so he has to kind of itch them to not go to Mars.
Yeah, it might be that, like, their programming for Mars is shittier than their other trips.
Right. But they have to offer it because it doesn't break down all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So it's still available as a ride in the park. Just know that sometimes you're going to be stuck up there in the middle of the ride. So that's what I think his approach is. But the pitching of this stuff that comes true, that's an interesting thing. Were they trying to maybe go bone deep that he had set this guy up to be this thing? And so he knew that if he went to this thing, this guy was going to say certain things that would lead him further down the path to finding out who he actually was and breaking the implanting. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing to consider with this guy.
Well, and on the other scenario where this is all in his head, these are just the things that got planted that helped him to construct the illusion that he's living in, because he had just heard this, and so he puts it into his own dream. Right. I just thought of another reason. This is not in the movie, though, but another reason why he hesitates about Mars. The Mars storyline is one about terrorists and actual, a government guy being a bad guy, and maybe politically they worry a little bit about, hey, maybe this thing goes a little too far. Scenario. And then he brings up this idea of options and says,
Could I ask you just one question, though? What is it that is exactly the same about every single vacation you have ever taken?
I give up.
by the way, this is the moment where I wrote down, man, I think Arnold has really learned to act at this point. Because we watched Arnold study acting in public. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, by the way, one of the key transitional movies I think that leads to this is the first one where I saw, where A, I saw him play a character, B, he made a clear choice to control his career, and C, he's really funny, and that's Twins.
Yeah, which not coincidentally is his first $100 million plus movie. There's a reason that one broke through.
You're the same. No matter where you go, there you are. It's always the same old you. Let me suggest that you take a vacation from yourself.
And at first, he's not interested in it. And then he says, look, here are a list of different identities you could have. And he puts it on the screen and he says,
why go to Mars as a tourist when you can go as a playboy or a famous jock?
And then Quaid jumps in on this and points to,
secret agent. How much is that?
And this is either that's just a fantasy that he has, and it sounds like a really fun fantasy, or it's because he is in fact a secret agent and he's somewhere in that, as you said, bubbling up is this little thing that says that's what you're supposed to be.
Well, and if you go by the DNA of the original short, it's absolutely that he's a past secret agent that doesn't remember it, right? Because that's the whole premise of the actual story, is that these memories are just suppressed and they weren't properly erased. So if you're going by when they wrote the original screenplay, that would have been the material they were working with. They would not have actually, until it was added later, had the concept that maybe he's just a dude that wants to live out this fantasy, and that's what he's going to do over the next 90 minutes, is you're just seeing his Wizard of Oz dream.
Yeah. It's funny. I years ago, I didn't reread this one, but I read "When Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," which is what Blade Runner is based on, and it's very much the same thing. Some of the core science fiction ideas are there, but all the emotional stuff, all the depth comes in the movie. It's not in the short story. You know.
You are a top operative, back under deep cover on your most important mission. People are trying to kill you left and right. You meet this beautiful, exotic woman.
And so far, this is exactly what's going to happen in the movie. And then he says,
I don't want to spoil it for you, Doug, but you rest assured, by the time the trip is over, you get the girl, kill the bad guys, and save the entire planet.
3 for 3 on that one.
Yeah. It's so I love this. I love that construction.
Yeah.
You know,
this is like Cameron in Titanic showing you exactly how the boat is going to break apart and sink.
Yeah. Well, and there are certain movies which you have to watch more than once. You know, like The Sixth Sense, you watch it the first time, and then you have to go back and watch it again, knowing what you know and seeing that it all fits together.
Yeah.
And this movie, these are all throwaway lines that don't mean anything to you until you watch it again. And you go, wait a minute, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. So
needless to say, Quaid is all in and he smiles, and we have a perfect cut to him being loaded into the machine. And there is David Nell, who plays Ernie.
It's your first trip?
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't worry. Things hardly ever fuck up around here.
Just what you want to hear. We have Rosie Dunsmore, who comes in as Dr. Lull. And I like that. And it's funny, you know, this is the weirdest thing I'm about to bring up, but I recently, because I'm in my mid-50s, had to have a colonoscopy. And they have the system. When you go into that, the people are like, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And it's all very efficient. They've done it a million times before. And that's exactly how this feels, you know?
Yeah, I will co-sign that. Having had 5 colonoscopies in my life, this is exactly, and the thing where they're asking you questions as you drift away. This is exactly what happens.
Did you say demure or sleazy when they?
I don't even get that far.
Yeah.
Or both. All of them. Aggressive as well. All of them.
And she brings up, you know, do you want to see some alien artifacts? And is going through some artwork. And one of the last pieces of artwork looks a lot like that reactor we're going to see. Then Ernie says something as they're talking about the scenario. He goes, that's a new one. Blue sky on Mars. which
Yeah.
is exactly what we're going to see.
Yeah.
Ready for Dreamland?
Gives him a shot, which looks like it hurts, and she doesn't have a. She
No,
doesn't.
it just lets him bleed out.
Yeah.
I'll be asking you some questions, Doug, so we can fine-tune the ego program. You answer honestly, you'll enjoy yourself a whole lot more.
And then we bring up these sort of wireframe CG women to find what kind of women that she likes.
Yeah.
She asks blonde, brunette, redhead. Shockingly, he picks brunette. By the way, it is really smart to ask these questions while someone's drugged. You will get much more honest answers.
Demure, aggressive, sleazy, be honest.
Sleazy.
Yeah, I feel like there's something between demure and aggressive. I feel like there's somewhere in between that they missed one, but yeah, interesting choices.
I mean, one of the many criticisms of this movie is that its portrayal of women as mostly, prostitutes or betray you, is not that, and the fact that your only options, all women are either demure, aggressive, or sleazy.
Yeah,
that's not really the best portrayal.
Yeah, fair point.
But after saying sleazy, he says demure. I think it should have been reversed. I think he should have said demure first, and then as the drugs really hit, he should have said sleazy. I think that's that's how I would have done. And then we're seeing on the screen the woman slowly become more of what he's describing, and the final image that comes up on the screen seems oddly familiar.
Yeah.
So either that is clear evidence that this is a dream. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm going back and forth about what that is evidence of.
Well, I think it's only evidence insofar as you trust Quaid's point of view, right? Because it could be that what's actually, if you were a doctor in that room right there, you just still see those kind of wire images that don't really have many details. And when we're seeing it looks clearly like Rachel Ticotin, is that because Quaid is projecting that onto her as he goes night-night?
Right, because we're seeing it from Quaid's point of view.
Right.
That's a great point, Brendon. So it is what he's seeing, and he may already, as he's going under, be visualizing Rachel Ticotin in that moment.
Yes.
I don't think this movie explores this, but memory's a weird thing, and our memories are when we think of our memories, they're constructed, and the more times you think of them, the more you rewrite the parts of your brain that are storing them. So you're not really remembering what happened. You are remembering your memory of remembering that memory.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and it's really easy. There was a story, it may or may not have involved us doing drugs, where we had a discussion of which order the drugs were done in. And I am 100% convinced I know who did the drugs in which order. And half of the people that were in the room agree with me, and half of the people have an entirely different order. And I go, and this is, again, it goes to there is no way to actually know what really happened in that. We all remember the thing.
Yeah. It's why eyewitness accounts are flimsy for evidence.
Yeah. By the way, as you mentioned, it's Rachel Ticotin. She's in things like Fort Apache, The Bronx. She's in Falling Down, which is a movie I haven't seen in a long time. And Con Air, which we did on the Cine-Files.
Yes, that was fun.
And then we cut back to sales, where we're looking at some muscly guy working out, and Mr. McClane is trying to make another sale, and she's arguing about getting souvenirs. I'm like, what kind of vacation did she want to go on?
Yeah, you only seeing the muscle dude at a gym, he's using a bar.
But I love the way Verhoeven does this, which is in the midst of this conversation, which I haven't mentioned before, but we have video screens on our phones, which are pretty cool. We see the doctor freaking out without being able to hear her.
Yeah.
And it's the real intense section of that score picking up just as you catch the score directs your attention to the video screen, right? The score is not about whatever is going on in this sales room. The score is amped up already, something is going down in that operation room.
Bob runs over to the lab, which apparently is right next door, and there is Arnold completely crazed.
I do love, before he gets to the lab, though, he screams to the secretary, "Don't let her leave!"
The salesman.
Do you think McClane works on commission?
Totally.
Get off you! You blew my cover!
Who is this that's yelling here?
Hauser. because the memory cap got busted by putting this implant in, and now he's afraid that they know he's beyond. The memory is not Doug Quaid; it's somebody else.
Well, and because I'm going like, why is Hauser acting like this? I mean, part of it is it could just be because it's such a bizarre circumstance that he's, But I also go like, well, he was supposed to wake up on Mars after Quato was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So now he realizes that this whole plan they put into motion is broken because he's waking up on Earth.
Yeah.
And that's why he's angry. And to be clear, enraged Arnold is a scary dude.
Yeah.
They'll be here any minute. They kill you all.
So Hauser knew that the plan was that Richter was going to be on Earth, kind of observing him, and had orders to kill him if anything went wrong with the Quaid thing.
Right, because if you remember later on, Richter basically is like, we should have killed him when we were still on Mars.
Yeah,
like we shouldn't have even gotten it to this point.
Yeah. Because in Richter's mind, Hauser did turn against them.
That's right.
Okay.
He's not in on the double turn.
Yeah, which, by the way, and we'll go into it more later, this is a dumb plan.
Yes. Why not just tell Richter?
Yeah. Ever. I mean,
I guess the argument is that the mutants all have psychic abilities. And so if any other person knows, it endangers the subterfuge.
Right. Yes. But he could come up with some reason for Richter not to just immediately try to kill Hauser.
He's really making the plan much harder for himself.
Yeah.
Cohagen is.
Yeah. We need to come up with some other lie of why they had to keep him alive. And I love that McClane is yelling at the doctor, and really, he's an asshole to her.
Use your head, you dumb bitch. He's just acting out the secret agent portion of his ego trip.
I'm afraid that's not possible.
Why not?
Because we haven't implanted it yet.
By the way, when they start talking about the agency, and then the doctor slaps Ernie. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that's a little extreme. I don't know what you need to do.
It just shows you how it works in certain offices, right? Because, remember, when he comes down there, he calls the doctor a bitch. He says, why couldn't you figure this out, bitch? And she's like, we didn't implant it, you fucking moron. And so then this guy comes in, and then she slaps him because it all rolls downhill in how they handle things in that office. I'm surprised. I'm glad the receptionist got out of there before she got attacked by the guy with the glasses on. So, yeah.
But I do think this is a very smart scene for them to put in, right? It's not just the screaming and then they trank him and he goes out and then the next thing you see, he's dumped into the taxi cab, because I very distinctly remember this, even as an 11-year-old or however old I was the first time I saw this, that I was like, oh, he's living out the ego trip, right? He's talking about, you blew my cover, or the thing happened too soon or whatever. And so the idea that they hadn't implanted it yet is important, because then for the next 30 minutes or so, you still are trying to stay a little bit ahead of it, right? Like, this might still be a dream. I don't know, right? And it isn't until you get to the 1 hour mark where everything changes.
All right, look, here's what we're going to do. Renata, cover up any memory that he's got of us or Rekall.
I'll do what I can. It's pretty messy in there.
Which I think is also a great plan.
Nice detail.
Yeah. Basically, what they're going to do is dump him in the cab, refund his money, destroy all evidence that he was ever here. And the last thing he says is, and if anybody comes asking, we never even heard of Douglas Quaid. And we cut to a Johnny cab.
Yay.
You're in a Johnny cab.
I mean, what am I doing here?
What's crazy is that we have self-driving cars now and taxis that pick people up. But I love the image that we had to have an actual robot cab driver.
Yes.
This is designed by Rob Bottin, who did all the creatures. He did the puppets. He did the special effects, mutant makeup. This guy, and I was so funny because I was looking at some of the stuff and I was like, you know what this reminds me of? Is The Thing, which makes sense because that's where he did The Thing. He did all the designs of The Thing. Also did all the special effects kind of makeup things for RoboCop.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice of Johnny Cab is Robert Picardo, best known as the Doctor from Voyager.
I would guess by the way the Johnny Cab looks, he was even the model for the Johnny Cab.
Yes, he
totally.
Huh?
How did I get in this taxi?
The door opened. You got in.
And then the robot rolls its eyes. They programmed him to be a dick.
Well, particularly when you really mess with him, which we'll see later on.
Yes. Yeah, I like that the punishment for fare evasion in the Johnny Cab is very severe.
It's rough, man. Look, the economy is difficult in 2080, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Especially on Mars, yeah.
Yeah, so he drops him off, and there's Harry.
Gary, how was your trip to Mars?
What trip?
You went to REKALL, remember?
But of course, now he doesn't remember going to REKALL at all.
Right.
Because that was wiped out. And Harry goes, come on, I'll buy you a drink. And Quaid's trying to get out of it politely. And I think we're watching going, this is kind of odd. How does Harry know that he went to REKALL? Like, that's a weird thing. And then out of nowhere, 3 guys grab him. Harry pulls a gun, which, you're working with your buddy and suddenly your buddy has a gun on you. They drag him away. And at first he's going,
What the fuck did I do wrong? Tell me!
You blamed Quaid! You blamed about Mars!
and it is vulnerable for Arnold.
I love that he says, what the fuck did I do wrong? That is such a great part of this. It's not like, fuck you, I'll kill you, let go of me, unhand me. It's, what did I do?
Yeah. You know what's funny? It just occurred to me, like, how hard Conan and Terminator are the Arnold roles for the first part of his career.
Yeah.
And that he really had to work hard to go, how do I counteract Conan and the Terminator?
Yep.
Are you crazy? I don't even know anything about Mars.
You should have listened to me, Quaid. I was there to keep you out of trouble.
So this is another person whose full-time job is to just watch Quaid.
Yeah, monitor Quaid.
They throw him against a wall. Were they going to just kill him here?
I don't know, because later, Ronny Cox, Cohagen is like telling Richter, don't you kill him. Don't you dare kill him. So I think maybe they were going to stun him or subdue him in some way. I don't think killing was an option. Then again,
it looks like they were going to kill him
and points at him. So
yeah, I this is again going back to Cohagen's terrible plan. I think that everyone who was told you have to watch Quaid, because then, Sharon Stone in less than a minute or two is going to start trying to kill him too. She's legit trying to shoot and stab him to death.
That's true.
So I think that everyone was told you're to watch this guy, and if he somehow slips his programming as Quaid, he has to be ended, right? And I guess the Cohagen plan there was that once that alarm bell got sung, they would somehow extract him. They would get him out of there and get him back to Mars. But I think there was just too much risk involved in this plan that Quaid was never, if Quaid was ever not Quaid, if there was even an inkling of Hauser being in there, then the plan would get found out by Quato.
Well, the other possibility is that Cohagen did tell everybody, don't kill him, blah, blah, blah. But Richter changed their orders to him, because I bet all those people work for Richter. Actually, and Cohagen hired Richter and his crew to take care of this guy and monitor this guy. That's why Richter's wife is involved in this. That's why his buddies are. So it could be that
I think Richter is definitely the source of everyone's, decision to try to kill this guy. Yeah, but I also think Richter was stupidly kept so in the dark of this, and to keep a psychopath in the dark who is willing to shoot anyone at any time is probably not the best part of this plan.
Exactly, in public places, no less.
This is good advice from Brendon. Never keep a psychopath in the dark.
Maybe not for this instance, for sure.
So it looks like maybe Harry could be trying to kill him. And again, it's the vulnerability coming off of Arnold.
Harry, you're making a big mistake. You got me mixed up with somebody else.
And then suddenly Arnold strikes back. And I love the double kick, the double elbows. As you said, Vic Armstrong understands how Arnold can fight. Mm-hmm. And the brutality of he breaks Harry's neck, breaks another dude's neck, grabs another guy and shoots him with his own gun, and then kills the final guy. And this is where I wrote down, this reminds me of Matt Damon's first fight in Bourne Identity.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is one of my favorite fight scenes, by the way. Mm. I used to teach it when I taught in film school. I did action sequences class, and I always taught that it's like a 17-second fight scene. It is perfect storytelling, which is another movie I would do on the Cine-Files at some point.
Hell yeah, we're way overdue for doing that one.
The other thing, by the way, to me, the way that he drops the gun is Michael dropping the gun in The Godfather. It has the exact same gesture of holding it up and letting it drop. And now we're back with Laurie, who's taking a virtual tennis lesson in a very late 80s outfit.
What are you doing?
Some men just tried to kill me.
Muggers? Are you all right?
No, they were spies or something.
And I'm kind of surprised that Laurie didn't get a call. Like, Harry obviously got notified that he went to REKALL. Why didn't Laurie get notified?
Tell me exactly what happened. Why would spies want to kill you?
I don't know, but it had something to do with Mars.
And she is playing my husband is acting crazy. I need to calm him down. But then she gets angry about the fact that he went to REKALL.
Listen to me, sweetheart. Those assholes at REKALL have fucked up your mind. You're having paranoid delusions.
You call this a delusion?
And holds up his bloody hands. And she goes to call a doctor. He goes to wash up. And again, there's that look from her. And then she goes over to the video phone. And I love the way Richter, which is the great Michael Ironside, the way he comes into frame to look at her, I think is cool. So he had auditioned for the lead in RoboCop and didn't get it. And Verhoeven offered him the role of Clarence Boddicker in RoboCop. And which I would never want to. I don't remember what's the actor's name, John? You probably know.
Kurtwood Smith.
Thank you again.
Smith,
I know my name's not John, but I just thought I'd drop that in there.
I mean,
also Kurtwood Smith was offered the role of Richter.
Oh wow!
And he said he didn't want to do it because he'd be repeating the thing he had just done.
Too many psychos. Yeah, I think that was the reason Ironside turned down Boddicker.
That's what I thought. Yeah. I guess you get so don't keep a psychopath in the dark, and don't repeat as a psychopath too often.
Right.
Not too often. Right. Although Walken's made a whole career out of it. So who knows? It all depends on how many times you do it and in which way, I guess.
He comes out of the bathroom and we see a figure, but we can't exactly see who it is, except we know who it is because it's Laurie. And she opens fire. Terrible shot.
Terrible shot.
Yeah, because she's blows 5 holes right around the door.
And she's 10 feet away. I mean, and had plenty of time to aim.
Yeah. It's in her defense, she's much, much better at hand-to-hand combat.
Well,
not in her defense. He's the size of a mountain. For God's sake.
And that's what we're going to get next, because he charges this figure and then turns on the light, realizes it's Laurie.
Laurie!
She immediately elbow shot to the balls. Arnold gets hit in the balls many times.
It's 2 in a row right here.
I've always said, look, if you've any martial arts training at all, that's the first thing you learn how to protect.
Yeah.
But she does some kicks. And then she slashes him across the chest with his knife.
Yeah.
A wound that we never see again and never has any consequences. It just kind of disappears entirely.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have a bloody shirt or anything in the next scenes, I don't think.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And he disarms her, grabs the gun. By the way, apparently Sharon Stone loved the fight choreography and had a ton of fun, except for what she said was that kicking Arnold when he blocked was like kicking granite. So her arms and legs were just covered in bruises from just hitting Arnold.
Talk. I said talk.
I'm not your wife.
The hell you're not.
I swear to God, I never saw you before 6 weeks ago. Our marriage is just a memory implant.
You think I'm stupid?
And I think, again, going back to what we were talking about before, I think if he had any real feelings for her, this would be an upsetting thing to be told.
Remember our wedding?
Was implanted by the agency.
Falling in love.
Implanted.
But it almost seems like he just accepts that right away because because I think those feeling that the relationship never felt real to him.
Yeah.
They erased your identity and implanted a new one. I was written in as your wife so that I could watch you and make sure the erasure took. Sorry, Quaid. Your whole life is just a dream.
Can I just say, Sharon Stone is so good here.
Yeah.
This is I know that Verhoeven has said in general, her performance as Laurie is what put her in Basic Instinct, that he liked how she could switch from being tender and loving and just being a killer. But it's this scene that I see Basic Instinct. It's just the kind of grizzled, straight, matter of fact, here's the deal. I'm giving this to you straight. And if you don't like it, take it up with someone else. And this is the first time in the movie you're seeing this, because she's been playing the doting wife the whole time. This is like, anyone who ever wants to come at Sharon Stone and give me some guff about saying Sharon Stone's awesome, like, this is the first instance of being like, yes, she is. She could do it. She knew how to do. This is why she became a superstar, because she knew how to turn the notes. She could hit all over the scale.
Yeah. Her and Kim Basinger got undue amount of crap in the 80s and 90s for their quote unquote abilities, and it's been great to see people going back and revisiting and reappreciating what they brought to their roles and how tough their roles actually were in certain movies, to give levels to those roles to make them more than just the female love interest, you know? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, seeing her do this, and she disarms him so much that they're like sitting around like two people who just had a fight and are trying to put the relationship back together.
Right. Well, and then the interesting thing is in that part, right, what's going to happen now, where she sits there with him, she sees them on the screen, right? Yes. So she's back to, what do I do to stall for time? She's acting again, right? Yeah. She's playing Laurie. Yeah. And she's doing that again when she comes back with the doctor. And she was doing that for the whole first 20 minutes of the movie. That one section where she just tells him straight up, here's what's going on. That's like the first time you ever see who this person is who was playing Laurie. Right. And then you don't see it again.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting about it is that the reason that we don't trust her is that the performance isn't perfect. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And again, we've talked about it so many times, but it's like moving that slider a little bit, you know, when she says your whole life's just a dream, that's full on her. That's totally honest. That's just the truth. And everything else is the slider is moving around of how good am I doing at pretending to be the thing, which is why, you know, the whole thing about her being jealous about the brunette and no, I'm serious and all that stuff, that all plays weird because it is a performance, you know, but we don't quite understand exactly what the performance is. That is assuming that it is that he is a spy and this part isn't a dream, because if this part is a dream, then that wasn't a performance, you know?
Right.
So, and as you said, she sees people coming on the screen, and this is where, and I heard Verhoeven say this, is that he didn't make any sacrifices for home video, is that he wanted this to be seen in the cinema. And back in the day, watching this on your small 4x3 pan and scan TV, this would have been hard to see, you know, that little screen way in the background. But on my big TV now, it's not. And I love the act that she puts on. It's great. She, you know, offers some naughty sex, and you could see, you know, obviously Sharon Stone, beautiful woman. This is a little bit intriguing to Quaid for a moment.
I didn't know you were so kinky.
And then, you can do the Arnold impressions from now on. And then he sees that she's looking at the screen.
Clever girl.
So, is this what pops up in Jurassic Park 3 years later? Is this a little bit of an allusion to that when he says, clever girl, when the dinosaur eats him in that moment, the hunter there? I don't know.
So we've connected The Truman Show, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Born Identity, Jurassic Park,
The Matrix.
The Matrix is coming. We got some other ones too. Yeah. All right. I don't know, but obviously that line totally jumps out at me.
Yeah.
You wouldn't shoot me, would you, Doug? After all we've been through.
And of course, A, he's going to shoot her, and B, he says some of it was fun, and then he hauls off and hits Sharon Stone with a massive haymaker.
Yeah.
And it's
a left cross too. Like that was.
I mean, it's a big punch, and it's weird. Like, I don't think there's a lot of movies that would have, regardless of whether or not she's a bad guy, giant, huge Arnold just punch, you know, knockout punch on tiny little Sharon Stone, you know?
Yeah.
He heads out running down the stairs. The bad guys see him. The score, this whole sequence, I wish on the Blu-ray, and I'd almost be tempted to do it, I wish there was an option to just have the score and pull out all the sound effects and everything else, because I bet it would be amazing to watch this sequence. And really, because, you know, when you're in the mix, you know, you're deciding what's going to come out on top. And so usually, you know, dialogue's almost always going to come out on top. And then you have effects and Foley, and you're going to bring those up, and you therefore have to bring the score down, or you bring the score up, you'd have to bring the effects down. And most of the time, the effects are on top throughout this sequence. And I think that's why I was like, every time I hear that score coming up, I'm like, oh my God, it's so good. bad guys come into the apartment. There's this guy going over to help Laurie, and man, Richter kicks him.
Don't touch her.
And then we see this guy who's tracking him. And again, it's like early kind of CG graphics on his little tracking device. This is Michael Champion, who is a musician, has a very odd acting career. One of the quotes I saw about him says he was very talented. He could also be a little unusual. We called him Crazy Mike.
Shit, he's going for the subway. Let's get him. Go. Let's go. Move it.
They head out, and then we have Richter and Laurie kiss. And we're like, oh, the plot thicks. So now we head down to the subway. This is filmed in the Mexico City metro system, which they then repainted to make it all this sort of gray look. Again, we get to that X-ray machine, except now there's this red gun. And I think this looks so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It looks great. And you have the guards all come. You see all their guns. They're coming in on both sides of Arnold, who we're seeing only as the skeleton. And then he turns, and with nowhere else to go, I think this shot is amazing.
Yeah.
We see him as the skeleton leaping towards the screen, and then he shatters through it.
This was the shot they used as the money shot on the video game commercial for the Total Recall video game, and I remember seeing it during wrestling every week.
Nice. Richter and his men are running through the crowds. They split up to trap him on the escalator. The guys at the top of the escalator shoot down at him. He uses the body for a human shield. It is super bloody. Then he uses it again to protect himself from the guys below, tosses the body at them, which then gets stepped on.
This part on the commentary, Arnold is just delighting in.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, now I use him as a human shield, and now I throw him down the stairs. It's a continuous human shield.
He defends it, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
What else are you going to do in this situation?
That's right.
Which I thought was hilarious. But this is the scene that when they initially ran it to the
MPAA.
The MPAA is what deemed it an X.
Yeah.
Official rating. And so they had to cut some of this scene down so they could get the R rating for the movie. Yeah.
Which my guess is, and this is a very common tactic, is Verhoeven, you always put in more gore than you want. And that gives you a negotiating position to take, oh, no, I can't take this out. I can't. All right, I'll take this one thing out to get to where you want to be. We're running along this train. Arnold breaks the glass and drives into the moving train. Apparently, the glass is supposed to shatter, and it didn't shatter correctly on one of the takes. And so Arnold just punched the glass with his hand, which he does in Terminator when he actually breaks the glass window of the station wagon and cut the shit out of his hand, apparently, on this. There are a lot of injuries on this movie. And as I'm watching these guys just run around just shooting up the subway station, I'm like, are there police in this world? Like, are there any consequences for anything ever?
Great point, man. Great point.
Richter is not happy.
I want that fucker dead.
I don't blame you, man. I wouldn't want a guy like Quaid porking my old lady.
You saying she likes it?
No, I'm sure she hated every minute of it.
Let me tell you something. To be the right-hand guy of the psychopathic right-hand guy, you have to be psychopathic in a different way. And clearly Crazy Mike is psychopathic in a different way.
Yes, an apt name.
It doesn't kill him for saying that.
Yeah. And then we're getting a call from Cohagen, Ronny Cox, who is... my favorite of his villainy is obviously in RoboCop. But he's doing a lot in this character.
What the fuck is going on down there? I'm trying to neutralize a traitor, sir. If I wanted him dead, you moron, I wouldn't have dumped him on Earth.
So this is the first we hear that he wants him alive for some reason.
Yeah.
Listen to me, Richter. I want Quaid delivered alive for reimplantation. Have you got that? I want him back in place with Laurie.
And the moment he says, I want to send her back to Laurie, particularly after Crazy Mike just said the thing about, porking your wife, he starts to do the classic, my cell phone call's breaking up. You see, we got sunspots because he doesn't want to hear this. Quaid, again, we're walking through. This is all shot in Mexico City. And throughout this whole movie, we've seen Coca-Cola, we've seen Pepsi, we've seen Fuji, we've seen all sorts of capitalism showing in the background. And they're tracking him because they have a red dot for some reason. He goes into a hotel room, gets a phone call. I could not find this actor's name.
If you want to live, don't hang up.
What do you want?
They've got you bugged. They'll be busting down your door in about 3 minutes unless you do exactly what I say.
And what they tell him is the bug is in his skull and he has to wrap a towel around his head to muffle the signal, which is a wet towel. So he goes into the bathroom, wets a towel, wraps it around his head. And at the moment he does, that red dot that we were tracking kind of expands and they've lost him.
We'll find you.
He comes out with a beautifully folded towel turban on his head.
The guy even mentions that to him. He says, all right, you look great. Come on, come on back.
I mean, I could never, I don't have that skill. I think that's, I don't know if that's a Hauser skill or something. It did a very, very nice job. And
I will say, I really love this whole sequence though, because it's the most Hitchcockian part of the film where, this stretch of like, let's say 20 minutes from once, Harry confronts him till basically he watches the video that Hauser has set up for him. This is your classic, innocent man done wrong sequence. And it has a lot of like noir and Hitchcock undertones to it. And then I was very surprised to find out that Verhoeven, because I just watched this and thought it was general, boilerplate Hitchcock style. But he took from the very minimally seen Hitchcock Torn Curtain. He said he used that as because I guess Cold War type of espionage thriller. And he was, thinking of that in terms of influence for this movie, which I just thought was a really, that's again, going back to something we were saying at the very beginning, finding a guy like Paul Verhoeven to match up with this is so much different than, no offense to him, but like Chuck Russell, who directed Eraser, right? Mm-hmm. Like there you have a very like workmanlike, jobbing, gun for hire director. This is an artist who made this. And it just so happened that his sensibility meshed perfectly with Arnold.
I think the Hitchcock thing, it's funny because I had heard him mention Hitchcock too, and he mentions it about one of the other scenes later on that we'll get to. But what I hadn't thought about, and you're totally right, is this is the man who knew too much. This is North by Northwest.
North by Northwest, yeah.
There's some, except the only thing here, he doesn't even know what he knows.
That's right.
Like there's the MacGuffin is the memories that he can't access in his brain, and suddenly everyone is out. It is such a Hitchcock situation. For no reason I could possibly understand, everyone is after me, and my life is thrown upside down. Mm-hmm. And this guy who's told him to put the towel on his head, we now look out the window and he's right at the phone booth there. He has a suitcase. He has to say, you have to come get this. And he says that you told me to do this. This is one of the key pieces of information. He says,
we were buddies in the agency back on Mars. You asked me if you disappeared to come and find you, so here I am. Goodbye.
What was I doing on Mars?
He goes outside and this woman has picked up the suitcase. And he's going,
excuse me, ma'am, but this is mine.
I don't see your name on it.
Someone left it for me.
You go find your own bag.
Excuse me, ma'am, but I need it.
And he fights her for this. I mean, he doesn't fight her, but he rips the suitcase out of her hand.
He battles with her to take the damn thing off.
I need it.
And she says,
fuck you, you asshole.
Which is, Arnold says that in the Terminator. He says, fuck you, asshole, in Commando. I like Arnold's little bow as he leaves.
Although I find it very funny that on the commentary, he's laughing at this, Arnold, and he goes, that's a very Paul Verhoeven moment. Like, for some reason that was indicative of Paul Verhoeven style to have an old lady say obscenities.
And of course, our bad guys are still looking for him, and there he is, right there. So he runs, jumps into a Johnny cab.
Drive!
Would you please repeat the destination?
Quaid cannot come up with a street address or anything else.
Shit!
I'm not familiar with that address.
His solution is to just rip the robot off of the floor of the cab, grab the throttle. They're firing at him. It's a great shot of him spinning the car. He gets away, pulls into this abandoned factory, which is an old cement factory outside Mexico City.
The fare is 18 credits, please.
Sue me, dickhead.
And then the robot bursts into flames, like he's angry.
And screams like a warrior cry.
And then he gets out of the cab and the car chases after him, slams into a wall, and explodes. So bizarre.
Where's my $2?
Totally.
And doesn't he say, I hope you enjoyed the ride or something?
That was the closing line of the trailer.
Oh, that's funny. So he opens up this large package, and inside there's these stack of money, and there's a fake ID, and there's weird devices that I'm sure we're going to see a little bit later. And then he sees this watch, and he pushes a button, and it lights up red. And then instantly he sees someone coming around the corner, and it's really scary. He hides, opens fire. And then there's this moment where it's like, something's weird about this. And you realize that he's moving as an exact mirror image of this image. And suddenly we go, oh, this is a hologram.
It's almost like when a pet sees itself in the mirror, right? It's just like, what the hell?
Yeah, totally.
It's exactly it.
Shoot first, ask questions later. I love that.
And what I love about this, and we'll get back to it much later, but I think this is a perfect plant in that obviously we see that this is going to be important, but it's so long before it comes back that by the time it does come back, I think we've completely forgotten about it.
Yeah. Well, that's true. It also, I think, served as a perfect little trailer nugget, which when they cut the trailer, you got the shot of, hologram Arnold approaching regular Arnold, and he blinks out a little bit, right? There's a little glitchiness. So in those 4 seconds of the trailer, you saw that. You saw like, oh, cool, 2 Arnolds, but clearly one was artificial. And that not only like seems like a good bit of like sizzle reel material, but it's essentially like part of the theme of the movie, right? Doubling, one being real, one being false, what is reality, what isn't. And so in that little brief period of time, it communicates a lot, even subconsciously, about the rest of the movie.
Absolutely. And I think in particular, because what's about to happen right now is he's about to come face to face with another version of himself. And again, we're asking exactly the question you bring up, Brendon, which is, okay, which one of these guys is real? Because he reaches into this bag, pulls out this flat screen, which again, this is 2024 technology we're seeing in 1990, because this is just normal hanging out a flat screen. And there on that flat screen is himself.
Howdy, stranger. This is Hauser. If things have gone wrong, I'm talking to myself, and you've got a wet towel wrapped around your head. Now, whatever your name is, get ready for the big surprise. You are not you. You're me. No shit.
And I think at this moment, as Quaid has come face to face with himself, and we don't know whether we're in a dream or in a spy story, and we don't know what's going on or why people have turned on him, I think is a good time to end part 1 of our exploration of Total Recall. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on Twitter, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. If you want to support the show and maybe listen to some of those Cine-Files shorts we mentioned during this podcast, you can do that on patreon.com/thecine-files, where you can also get ad-free versions of the show. You can join our advisory board. You also can support us by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, where also we have ad-free versions of the show and our Cine-Files shorts. And you can buy or stream Total Recall along with every other movie we've ever reviewed at cinephiles.net. And if you want to follow me, it's SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would people find you?
Yes, you can always find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. My YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. Just type in The Outlaw Nation and John Rocha. It'll pop up. And my other podcasts that I have, the Geek Buddies and the Hot Mic, that are out there for you all to subscribe to and enjoy.
And Brendon, do you have things that you would like to plug? And would you like people to find you on social media?
Well, they can look for me on social media, but unfortunately, I will say I'm in a period of my life where I'm on a complete break from my socials. It has been very liberating, and I might stay that way. At least I will for the time being. But what I would suggest, if you're interested in anything that we do on WTF, you could go to WTFpod.com and then find the show wherever you want to hear it on your podcast platform of choice. If you get really into the show, there's an option for you to go WTF Plus to just plus yourself up there. And that's where I do a weekly bonus episode that's got a lot of movie talk, a lot of pop culture, and we do extra bonus episodes with Mark on there too. So WTFpod.com is your one-stop shop.
And honestly, if you haven't listened to WTF with Marc Maron, just go take a look. Yeah. There's going to be a whole bunch of people being interviewed that you totally want to hear those conversations. For me, it's often the people who I'd never heard of that are actually some of my favorite episodes of that show. Brendon, this has been awesome.
Yeah,
thanks, guys. Looking forward to getting my ass to Mars.
Yeah. Eventually we'll get there. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think that's it for this week. And we'll be back next time to continue our exploration of Total Recall right here on the Cine-Files.